Brothers and sisters, friends of humanity, lovers of peace, justice, Pan-Africanism, and truth. I'm Dr. W. Randy Short. I'm a member of the Dignity Delegation. We're led by the Honorable Cynthia McKinney, and we have the honor to sit here with Mrs. Gloria Ford, a great African-American mother, the mother of Kenneth Ford. She's going to share with us her ordeal, along with her husband, to free her son, unjustly accused of espionage under the Espionage Act of 1917. She has an incredible story that will move you, and we'd like for you to share this with your friends that, yes, your freedom can be taken away in a society where secrecy, lies, dirty tricks, and a renewed Cointel Counterpro security state exist. Without further ado, I welcome you, Mrs. Ford.
Thank you very much.
I first wanted to just ask you, you're a mother. You have a son, one son. That's Kenneth. Could you tell us a little bit about how you raised your son?
Well, my husband, Kenneth Sr., and I raised Ken to be an honorable young man. He was born, he is now 40 years old. He was born, was an exemplary child, student. He went to DeMatha Catholic High School, graduated from there.
Honor student?
Yes, he did very well there. And he went to, from there, the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. And he did very well there. He graduated from there in 1995 with a degree in business management, a Bachelor of Business Management, Business Administration with the major in management. From there, he went into the United States Secret Service, vowing to protect the President of the United States. He did very well there. Receiving 2 cash awards for outstanding service in consecutive years. While serving at the White House in the United States Secret Service Uniform Division, he decided to go back to school to get another bachelor's degree. He enrolled in Strayer University and he received summa cum laude, a degree in a Bachelor of Science in networking.
Let me ask you
computer networking.
Another question.
Mm-hmm.
Ken worked at the White House. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that he literally would walk President Clinton's dog.
Yes, he did, more or less. What he said is, well, he worked overnight. So very often it was President Clinton's responsibility to bring Buddy out, the dog. And he and Ken would chat out there. He would just, they would chat every evening while Buddy was attending to his affairs.
Would you think that that would say that Ken clearly was someone that was highly trusted? Because at nighttime to be almost one-on-one with the president, that must say something about
it. It has to say something. He is highly honorable, and I know he was highly trusted.
Okay.
And then from there, while still there, he enrolled again into Strayer for a master's degree, and he received that in 2004, a Master of Science in Information Technology. And after leaving the Uniform Division of the Secret Service, he went to the National Security Agency, NSA, where he immediately was put on a team of workers, and through his work along with others, he received the first week he was there a cash award.
Wow, that's interesting.
The very first week, he hadn't even gotten his first paycheck.
Okay.
For outstanding service.
I want to segue back. When he was throughout his entire time prior to moving out on his own, had you had any worries or problems about your son?
None whatsoever. We were confidently able to send him to the University of Miami, 900 miles away. Didn't have any problems.
Would he
wasn't
come home
concerned.
for the summer?
He would come home at Christmas and for the summer.
Okay.
Then he would head right back, and never had any problems, any worries, no concerns, because he's been taught to follow the rules. Our family follows the rules.
Okay. Now we want to get right into looking at what began to happen. Now, your son had purchased a home in Waldorf.
Yes, in 1998, he purchased a beautiful home in Waldorf, Maryland. And
how old was he?
He was 26 years old.
Wow.
And he successfully lived there, a member of the community. He lived alone in Waldorf, and he was an honored member of the community.
I wanted to ask that your family seems to have strong values. That it would require that to raise a man of Ken's qualities. What's your religious orientation, or the family?
Well, Ken and Kenneth are Catholics, and I was married in the Catholic Church over 43 years ago, and my marriage to my husband Kenneth has endured all these years, and he, we've just been a family. Ken eventually came along, and I am a Baptist. I was baptized a Baptist at Bethesda Baptist when I was 7 years old. So I have been a Christian a long time. Ken was baptized in the Catholic faith when he was 9 weeks old, and my husband was baptized in the Catholic faith when he was 2 weeks old.
So if you had to describe your family life, yours and your husband and your son, would you say you were a happy family?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and you're a family that essentially went to work,
Yes.
went to church,
Yes.
and possibly you went to PTA or other things.
Yes.
But not much basically about the family.
Basically about the family. That's what we did.
Ken is your only child.
Yes, he is.
He's the only grandchild.
Of my mother, who is now deceased.
Which makes him special. Let's talk about, on January 10th, 2004, if I'm correct.
Yes.
You visited your son. How did you feel that day?
I did. I felt pretty good. I went to visit that particular day. We had snowing all that week, and flurry, snow, even the Friday. And that day it was very warm, and the snow was melting. People were coming out, and I felt pretty good. I got there. When I walked into the house, the way his family room was situated, and the timer was on the stove, I walked in at 11:54 a.m. And I felt pretty good. We had a good visit. I was there a number of hours that day.
Did you notice anything unusual that day?
I noticed something, but it wasn't unusual. It wasn't unusual until the following Monday morning. I did see this guy, a white guy, sitting on the side of Ken's house. Ken had a corner lot, and it was warm that day. As I said, he had on one of those baseball caps and a little baseball jacket, similar.
Did he have a vehicle?
Oh yeah, he was just sitting in a white vehicle. I really thought he was waiting for the neighbor across the street. Maybe they were going to play golf or something. I didn't really pay him any attention. I saw him very well, though.
Did you think, or did you perceive that he could have been looking at you?
No. I really thought he was waiting for the neighbor to play golf. I really thought that in my head.
And the 10th would have been the last normal day in your family's life.
Yes, and that was a Saturday.
On the following day, on the 11th of January, can you tell me what happened?
Well, that was playoff Sunday, and during the day, my husband and Ken were back and forth on the phone concerning the football teams and the statistics and what have you. But later on that evening, my husband called Ken to further discuss football. I'm not too much of a football person. And Ken wasn't answering the phone.
Was that unusual?
Yes, and we
How many
discussed.
times did you call?
Oh, maybe about 10 or 12 times. And, well, did Ken say he was, no. So.
And normally they would talk the entire length of a football game.
Yeah, back and forth. In fact, most football days, Ken would come over to our house and they would watch the game together. So, so this particular day, they were back and forth on the telephone.
Okay. So moving forward in that day, when did you, or did you go by the house at any point?
In the wee hours of the next morning, what happened was we said, well, maybe he did go out and didn't think too much more about it. Oh, I'll talk to him tomorrow when I get home from work and when he gets home from work, and didn't think anything about it.
Did you go to the house the next?
But my telephone rang at later on that night, and it was Ken's neighbor, and it was 12:54.
How did they sound? How did they sound?
Well, it was the wife, and she and her husband and children lived right next door to Ken, and she told me, I answered the phone because we don't get phone calls that late. It was 12:54 by the clock on the phone. And she told me that some people had taken Ken away in a car, and she thought it was the police.
How did you feel at that point?
I felt terrified, and Ken and my husband woke right up, and we felt panicky, terrified, and we didn't know what had happened. So we said, we'll be right there because we had keys to his home. So she said it was a line of cars all around the corner, and they were white, and she said that those cars had gone, and it was one car still sitting in the driveway, and they had just put Ken in the car, and he appeared to be cuffed because she told me they had his coat on around his arms. And so my husband and I drove the 20 minutes or so there. I drove, and my husband was in a panic. I was hyperventilating. I was breathing, and I'll demonstrate. All the way there. We didn't know what we were going to find.
Let me stop you for a moment and go back. You're from Washington, D.C., a D.C. native?
Yes.
But your family is from further south?
No. My mother was born in Washington, D.C. My father was born in Washington, D.C. My mother's mother was born in, I believe, Norfolk, Virginia, but she came to Washington, D.C. when she was 3 years old, and my father's mother was born in Washington, D.C.
You're a mother of a black man. When you heard the police and handcuffs and cars, could you just tell me some of what you could have felt or feared?
I didn't know what to think. My son? Why? My son is the most honest and honorable person you will ever meet. And we didn't know what I don't wish that on anybody, not even the perpetrators of this injustice, to My heart was beating out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know. We didn't know what was going on.
And your neighbor said that there was a street full of cars. So you figured maybe 20, 30 people with guns.
Yes,
at your son's house.
And when we and then we got there, and the neighbor said, the husband said that he had knocked on the door at least twice, and they told a white guy came to the door, and he said he wanted to see Kenny, and the white guy said, well, he's tied up right now, and that happened at least twice.
He's
tied up right now. And this whole ordeal...
Is a neighbor an African American?
Yes,
So that would probably be almost threatening to the neighbor.
Probably
with,
so.
I'm thinking of lynching. And
probably
tied
so.
Up, that could probably be very traumatic
probably
to the neighbor.
So. And all this started at about, we later found out, about 10 of 6. And the neighbor called us at 12:54 and said that he had just been taken out. So that's 7 hours.
So that means that Ken wasn't given the opportunity to even contact you after going through a period of interrogation.
Exactly.
When did you next see Ken?
About 12 o'clock or later. Well, later the next day. The first thing that happened is that my husband and the neighbor husband went into the house while the wife and myself stayed outside, and they looked around. The house was in disarray and things.
Excuse me. You're saying that the house appeared to have been ransacked?
Exactly.
Ken was and remains a bachelor. Did he have a lot of furniture, things in his house?
No. Ken had a large house. He had a 3-bedroom house. He had a living room, family. It was a beautiful home. And he had a basement. So nothing is basically in the basement except some exercise equipment. Nothing is in the living room or dining room. He had little family room furniture and little kitchen set, and he had a bedroom set.
So he didn't have so much that would require the kind of interaction with his material effects, you would think.
Exactly.
So you feel possibly the things were done to frighten or humiliate or just destroy the property.
Oh yes, and papers all over the place, and he had bottled water that he had bought for himself. Bottles sitting all over the place where they had helped themselves to his. So
they stole his water and then discarded them. Okay, so you go to the house, you see this. He is confined somewhere. Where was Ken?
We don't know. We found copies of a search warrants on his kitchen counter. The warrant, there were 3 copies, one for his house, one for his car vehicle, and one for his truck vehicle.
They left that in the house.
Yes, and
who was this?
It was the FBI.
The FBI?
It was the FBI. I have copies of that in my folder that's sitting next to you.
So
from that, we went after we looked through his house, and his pillows are all on the floor, and the things he had. But what was peculiar was that you could tell in his bedroom that they went half the room, and then they stopped. It's nothing else. His shoe boxes are intact. His clothes are intact. So, something's fishy here.
So they needed to make it look like they had at least done something.
Apparently so.
So you didn't know where Ken was taken. You see these 3 warrants left in the house. When did you regain contact with your son?
After court the next day, he appeared in court at I was about 3:45.
This is the 12th of January 2004.
Yes, and after that he was released on his own recognizance.
So he didn't have to pay bail or
No bail. He was let out on his own recognizance. Espionage
on his own recognizance after 9/11.
After 9/11.
Did that strike you as unusual, with them having people arrested under the Patriot Act and other
Well,
things? A person who is accused of espionage should be a flight risk, or at least there should be some way to monitor. If he's a spy, why would you trust them to leave on their own recognizance? Did you think about that?
Well, yes. After we got home and looked at the papers and what have you, and we started doing research because we didn't know anything of anything. And then we started realizing as we were reading what this entailed at 793E, and yes, it was very suspicious. But I do want to back up and say that after we left Ken's house, we went home and we got the telephone book and started looking up FBI installations. And we just called and asked, do you have a Kenneth Wayne Ford there? Some didn't answer. Some did and said they didn't. But curiously, one answered Calverton. And the guy answered, and I asked him, and he left the phone, and he came back and told me they didn't have such a person there. I found out later from Kenneth that he was at Calverton.
So they lied.
Of course.
And he never got an opportunity to call.
He didn't get an opportunity.
The entire time that he had been in their custody.
Exactly. And when Ken was being arrested at the end of the evening, Ken asked, well, can I at least call my parents? And the FBI agent, which I'll tell the name a little later, said, no, we wouldn't want to awaken them.
I want to ask you, because Ken is the only grandchild of your mother. Did you call your mother?
No, we didn't call anyone. In fact, we didn't tell anybody of this in either family, my husband's or my own, for 2 years. The only reason we didn't is because we didn't know what it was. And as we go through this interview, I'll go through all of that, how they illegally violated Ken's inalienable rights as being an American citizen. But when we approached court, then we told the families because we thought it was going to be a big to-do, but it wasn't. It was hidden.
I've got a picture here of a young woman. I'm going to pass it to you, and maybe you can hold it up so as you talk about her, people can see. I'm going to pass it to you. Does that picture look familiar to you at all?
Yes, it does.
Can you make certain that the people watching see that when you talk about it? Can you hold it sort of like that?
Yes.
And who is that?
This is Tanya L. Tucker. The L stands for Lil Shane. Lil Shane.
Why?
Tanya Lil Shane Tucker. And that's TonyA.
What makes her important to the situation?
Tanya entered into my son's life 9 weeks before the FBI converged on his home. Upon research, and we have proof of this, which we'll get into later, this woman is a confidential informant for the FBI. And this is what she does. She introduced herself as a lawyer to my son and to my husband and myself. But she is a confidential informant.
What do confidential informants do?
Confidential informants work for law enforcement Generally, they get into this type of position because law enforcement simply has stuff on them. They're trying to stay out of jail.
What's another word for confidential
Snitch. Snitch.
So she's a snitch.
She's a snitch for the government, and in this case, the FBI, through Special Agent Michael L. Thompson.
And you believe from your investigation following the arrest of your son that this woman was assigned to entrap him?
Yes.
And become friends and pretend that she's interested in him, and from there position herself to do damage to him?
Yes.
Did she do damage to your son?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did, but let's say things didn't quite work out the way they had planned. But she did do damage to him.
You met her. When did you first meet this woman?
I met her on November 22nd, 2003. My son had met her the week before.
That's the same day Kennedy got shot.
Yes.
Exactly. What, 50 years apart? 63, 2003. My.
40 years apart. And that was on a Saturday, that particular day in 2003.
My. And did she do anything? You're a mother. You remember the song, My Mama Told Me You Better Shop Around? You didn't like her.
I didn't like
Why?
her. Well, she's a big liar, for one thing.
How could you tell?
Well, the first thing, my son brought her in, and she was reluctant to come in, and I think I figured that out now why. But when she finally got there, my son said, Tanya, he said, Mom and Dad, this is Tanya Tucker. And then he said, Tanya, these are my parents, Kenneth and Gloria Ford. I got up to shake her hand, and I said, hello, Tanya, how are you? And she said, I'm losing a kidney. And I said, what? And she said, I'm losing a kidney. And then it was continuous lies for the rest of the evening.
Did she ever look you in your eyes when she, or did
she?
Yeah. Did she do anything else suspect when you met her while she
was
in the house?
She, being reluctant to come in, she was standing at the front door. And then the whole time she was there, I think that day she was there, and then we went out to eat. I think my husband and I were in her presence, I would say, at least 7 or 8 hours that day. And then we were in her presence a short time the next time. So we've been in her presence maybe about 9 hours total. Okay. And that particular day, while at my house, she kept looking out of my family room window.
Like she was expecting someone? Or?
Well, just standing there. She's talking, but she's looking out of the window. She's standing there. I mean, generally, you don't do that in someone else's home. She was continuously on a cell phone, whispering into a cell, continuously.
In front of you?
Oh, yes, all day long. Continuously.
When Ken did go to trial in late 2000, this December or 2004?
It started on November 29th, 2005. And it ended, the verdict came in on December 15th, 2005.
She testified against him?
Yes, she did. She was made to testify. By that time, we're 2 years in. We have violated all of Ken's speedy trial rights and other rights too, but hey, what does that matter? And really, the government, the prosecutor, did not want her to testify. And they told the judge that, oh, she's on vacation in the Virgin Islands. She's on vacation.
The state's witness is on vacation.
She's on vacation, and we can't reach her. So the judge said, "Well, you'll have to reach her." And
that's contempt
then,
of court, if I understand.
Yeah, but hey, what difference does any of that make? So the trial started that Tuesday, and she was brought in that Friday. And the prosecutor even asked her, was she on vacation? Oh, yes, I was on vacation in the Virgin Islands.
All right. Where I wanted to look, because we talked a little bit about Tanya, I want to just fill in that gap between the 12th of January 2004 and the trial. What was life like during those
Life
months?
Was hell for us.
19 months?
That is, yes, all of 2004 and all of 2005. We did not know anything.
So you expected possibly that they would come and pick Ken up again, or pick you up, or whatever. You just had no idea what
We
would happen.
didn't know.
You got no calls?
Ken was not able to work, not because he physically was not. He was prevented from working.
Okay.
He was prevented from working, and we didn't know anything. The government wouldn't talk to our lawyer, according to the lawyers. There was no indictment. There was nothing.
So there's silence.
He was just
for almost 2 years,
yes.
for 19 months. No one contacted you with the issue of espionage. Did any other strange things happen? Anything noticeable? Did your health, or was your husband, did anybody, did you notice cars or any calls, or both you and your husband were retired at
No. My husband, well, we work. My husband had retired from the post office after 39 years of service. And he retired in 2001 after this anthrax scare. And my husband did have to take the Cipro. However, my husband almost always had a second job since 1978 with the school system. And so my husband still worked for the school system, and he has over 30 years of service there. So, and of course, I work.
What happened with Ken's car, truck, and house? If he didn't have...
Well, what happened was we didn't start losing those things until 2008. We went through all of Ken. Now, this happened in 2004. We went through all of Ken's savings, all of our savings. We were paying his mortgage, all of his bills, our bills, his bills, law bills, legal bills.
What were your legal bills like?
In
fact,
we have paid about $150,000 at this point in legal fees, and we were paying all of this. And then in 2008, knowing this is a mistake, then in 2008, after he went to jail in 2006, and we still maintain, because we had an appeal in, not knowing our lawyer, Spencer M. Hatt, Esquire, was in collusion with the government.
So you have spent the better part of $200,000, $150,000 in cash, you know that offer, and more, and then some, to find that, in your effort to get justice for your son, that the legal team did not demonstrate legal ethics, that they basically were violating the attorney-client privilege.
Exactly.
And were there other things that you later found out that they were doing that would be either illegal or improper for the legal profession?
Yes. After Ken went to jail and we lost our appeal, I mean, I want the listening audience to understand that Kenneth is not only innocent, but nothing ever happened. This situation was made by 2 FBI agents, and we have solid proof of that. Where it originally came from, we don't know at this time. We have our guesses, but we have solid proof, hard proof of this situation being made up. And they framed this situation and put Ken in it. Nothing ever happened. So after this appeal was lost, I'm sitting there and I am knowing all of this, and I said, we have to get to the bottom of this. And my husband and I took the next it took years to compile the evidence that we do have. And we found out quite a bit. And we have solid proof of the illegality of this situation from the day it started to today.
I want to follow during that period that led up to the trial. Were you able to get, what kind of challenges did you face in getting legal representation for your son?
Well, we first had a public defender. And
you had the public defender. Now, you clearly had some means to retain an attorney. You had a public defender because of how quickly the state moved against.
Yeah, we didn't know what in the world this was. We finally met Ken and saw Ken in court, and he was being represented by a public defender. We didn't know what this was. She said she didn't know what it was.
She didn't know, but she was his defendant.
And so for the next 6 weeks, we kept the public defender. After about 6 weeks in, we said we need an attorney, preferably a black male. And we sought to find a black male.
Did you succeed?
Yes, we did. We retained the offices of Bruce Johnson and Associates. And immediately on the first visit, he assigned us to Spencer M. Hecht, who is white and Jewish. Okay, we thought Bruce was going to oversee this, but really, we found out that Bruce, in my opinion, and my family's opinion, is an idiot. And ultimately, Spencer left the firm, but we had invested time in them getting cleared to work on this case. So when Spencer left...
Cleared with the federal court system?
Yes, to get clearances, because this was supposedly a top secret espionage case.
Okay.
But we didn't know the details of it.
I want to segue to the trial because you now have your legal team.
Mm-hmm.
Your son is entering the federal court in Greenbelt, Maryland in November of 2005. You have a trial for about 4 weeks?
2
2 weeks.
2 weeks, from November 29th until December 15th.
With a jury with no black males that were on the jury, but maybe all the black males were alternates. Did you find that odd that they didn't want one black man on there?
Indeed, we did.
And mostly females. In the trial, there was no media coverage that you remember. Did you ever? You never got a call from the Post or the Times or CNN?
No,
nothing.
No, because they didn't know anything about it. It seems that when these trials are coming up, it's a schedule, and you look on the schedule and you see that it's a new trial, and they'll give the name of the trial. So on the first day, the different media types came. Now remember, This had been in existence for 2 years, and no one knew about it. And so the first day, the media came, but during the whole trial, espionage wasn't mentioned. No one knew what the charge was. At best, you would think it was a theft. So on day one, this media was there. But for the rest of the trial until the verdict, the only additional person sitting in the courthouse, sitting in the courtroom, was my husband. I was a witness, so I'm in the witness room.
So
there's no media.
Essentially one person sitting. Mr. Ford, Kenneth Ford Sr. is sitting there, watch them railroad his son. So this is about 2 years into it.
We're 2 years.
You hadn't reached out to your church or anyone at that point. When did you start talking to people to say, it's a trial, it's my son, he's innocent, he's a good person? Had you started to do that?
I reached out to my church. At that time, we were going to a mega church.
Okay, could you name it?
Yes, it was Ebenezer AME Church in Fort Washington, Maryland.
The pastor?
The senior pastor is Granger Browning.
And his wife?
And his wife, the co-pastor is Joanne Browning.
That church has maybe 15, 16, 17?
I believe at the time they purported to have 12,000 members.
So that's a very large church.
Yes.
Did you think at the time that maybe if you were a good member in good standing in a church with over 10,000 members, that just maybe, the pastor or the assistant pastor or a youth pastor or a prison pastor or a missionary or someone from the church, and that's the denominations of AME.
Yes, African Methodist.
They have about 5 million members nationally,
yes.
So they claim that maybe they would be able to do something, even token, a sermon or a prayer on the broadcast.
I would have thought. It
didn't happen?
In my imagination, I thought my church would come out, we would have rallies, we would have posters. The only thing I asked of the church, my husband and I wrote the co-pastor, and I didn't bring a copy today, but I have a copy of the letter, and we asked him to use his influence to have Jesse Jackson speak to us, because Jesse Jackson is an honorary pastor of that church, and he and Granger Browning have grown to be very close.
Let me ask you, you're aware that Jesse Jackson has had at least 2 of his children have legal challenges, whether wrongly or falsely. Do you think that he would have been able to get help from your pastor if he had asked, if he was in Washington, there was something that maybe a prayer or a letter of support?
Well, I think that at that point, you see, everything was hidden. It's still hidden, technically. It's hidden. And we knew that we wanted the media, and we knew that Jesse could bring the media. And we told Reverend Browning in the letter that though we have had tremendous financial burden placed on us, we were not asking the church for money. We were asking him to use his influence to just have Jesse talk with us. And the idea being that once we showed Jesse what we had concerning this exemplary black male, then Jesse would be more than happy to help. And if he didn't, then okay, we would have at least tried.
Let me ask a different question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever observed your former church, you no longer attend?
No, not that church.
That any child of an important person in that church getting into trouble and receiving perhaps some form of moral or political support from that particular church?
Well, though it wasn't announced to the church, but the Reverend's own son, it was rumored, had gotten into trouble when he went off to college, and it involved felonious acts of illegal substances, and
but
influence was used to get him out of this.
Whether that was true or false, there was help provided for this particular...
So we heard, yes.
So you understood. All right. The trial, when the verdict came down, were you there?
Yes.
You were with your husband?
Yes.
How long did it take them to decide to sentence your son?
Well, to find him guilty.
Yes.
I would say everything added, I don't even think it was a half an hour. Because the previous day, the trial ended, the jury was sent back, and then about 35 minutes later they were brought back because it was evening, and the judge said, well, we'll dismiss you. So in 35 minutes you probably had about 15 or 20 of those minutes to talk. Okay, so they were to report back at 10:30 the next morning. Now, and lunch was offered them that day. So by 1 o'clock, we heard that they had a verdict. So if they didn't have to arrive until 10:30, and then by the time you come in and take orders for lunch, then you eat the lunch, and at 1 o'clock you're announcing a verdict, then you're talking about 35 minutes of perhaps deliberation.
So they're eating and drinking soda, and your son gets, it's unanimous, the whole...
Yes, the jury was polled. The white ladies on the jury were crying. The court stenographer was crying. The court stenographer was crying. And let me mention right here about the jury. There was several questionable people on the jury, but one jury member was a black female who worked for the FBI.
God bless America.
God bless it.
So he's sentenced and he goes in...
Well, after the verdict, he still remains on his own recognizance. And he comes back on, he's determined to be guilty on December 15th. He's told to come back on March 1st for sentencing. On March 1st, there is no sentencing. We're told to come back on March 30th for sentencing. He's still on his own recognizance. And then on March 30th, he's sentenced to 6 years, 72 months in a federal penitentiary, 3 years probation afterwards, and a $200 court assessment.
In spite of everything he went through, he never made a plea deal, is that correct?
No pleas, because not only is Kenneth innocent, nothing ever happened. It's fabricated totally. And we have the proof.
Now, the prosecutor for the state wanted Ken incarcerated right after the verdict was given, if I'm correct?
Yes, and he was seeking 11 years.
11 years. And he was not... Did the judge intervene in this instance for him not to be sentenced or put in on the 15th of December?
Well, he wasn't put in on the 15th of December. He was sentenced on March 30th, and then he was still out on his own recognizance until May 6th. The judge explained he would get a letter in the mail as to which jail to report to, and he got a letter in the mail to report to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary by 1 o'clock on May 15th, 2006. And we, his parents, Kenneth Sr. and myself, took him to jail. And he reported at 12:45 on May 15th.
How was that day?
That day was terrible. I mean, we drove, Lewisburg is in Pennsylvania. We drove to Pennsylvania. We found the jail. We went there, and this exemplary young man, Secret Service, 3 college degrees, no trouble at all, and it was stated at his trial by a State Department official of his clearances. And
his level of clearance was
ultra top secret. I'll say top secret. I don't know the.
I saw a number that of in the entire United States with over 305 million people, only 150 people or fewer have the same clearance as
it's
him.
Fewer. His attorney kept asking the State Department official who would handle this, well, Mr. Ford's clearance is less than 300, less than 300 people in the United States have this, and then less than 250, less than 200, less than 150.
So,
at 150, the judge stopped it.
So he stopped it.
So we're to assume fewer people.
So less than 150 people out of a country of 300 million people had the same clearance as this alleged spy son of yours. And does the president have the same clearance?
No, because if you will remember, we elect we can elect anybody that we want. So if we elect a criminal, then so be it. We've elected a criminal. So he wouldn't be entitled to certain clearances.
So the president of the United States at that time, which was George W. Bush, who had DWI charges, did not have a security clearance level of someone who's sent to jail under false accusation.
We can assume that. We can assume that, and so you asked me how did I feel delivering this exemplary young man to a federal penitentiary. I felt horrible. My husband felt horrible.
He's your mother's only grandchild. How did she take it?
She didn't take it too well, and she prayed. Ultimately, she became ill.
Alzheimer's?
So she got into a depression. She was in a fire. She
all of this
rallied from that, and then she was put into a nursing home. While in the nursing home, she lost her memory of this, and she kept asking my husband and myself. We would visit every single week, and why isn't Ken visiting me? I don't understand why he isn't visiting me. So it was obvious she did not remember what had happened. So my husband and I made the decision it would be more hurtful for her to know that he's in a prison.
So his incarceration essentially broke her heart.
Yes, and she ultimately died.
Was he able to come to the funeral of his grandmother?
No.
Did you request?
No, we didn't, because he would have to come with guards and what have you, and no.
Your health, that's a lot of stress.
Lots of stress.
Anything different about your health since?
Yes. I had a cancer, but praise the Lord, I am a Christian, and I believe in the power of the Lord, and my cancer has been stopped. It's removed. I am cured, but I do have to go through chemotherapy. I am in chemotherapy now, and I have a treatment to go, and it will take me down for a while. And ultimately, I have lost all of my hair, and this is a wig, but praise the Lord, I'm on the upswing. But this has taken a toll on myself and my husband and my son.
How has he changed since
Well, he's a little less confident at this point, and he does not trust anybody in the government, and anyone can see why, because this is totally made up. And he has lost everything.
We're coming close to the end of the first segment. If you had maybe some thoughts just on what we've discussed thus far, to just give a discourse to mothers, to Americans, to foreigners, anyone that's concerned about law, justice, what would you talk to them about? How would you advise someone?
I would say that I don't know how this could have been prevented, but my family's eyes have been opened to the dishonesty of the government in this country. The government is supposed to help us, protect us. Over the last few years, my husband and I have compiled a letter which we sent to Eric Holder, and we have outlined every illegal act that has been done to Kenneth. We have cited legal precedents, and he cannot dispute it. He has had underlings to send us letters back saying, we don't handle this type of thing. I have written back to him telling him, oh yes you do. And I have named and given cases of various white defendants that he did it for. So I would say to Americans, pay attention to this story. This is not isolated because Kenneth worked in the classified field. This can happen to anyone. All you need is the dishonesty of the criminals who work in the Department of Justice, and it's no secret how I feel about them because I have written Eric Holder. I have given him very specific information. I have given him legal law, and I have told him about the criminals that he has employed there. But as long as these type of dishonest people are in there, we all are at risk of having something like this happen to us. And I would take heed to this story, and I would really pay attention. And when you see it, I would play it back. And the subsequent chapters that are coming, I would pay close attention, because this too can happen to you.